Okay, hi, I'm Ekaterina. I'm a linguist. It's a small linguistic study, a corpus-based one on evidential auxiliaries as non-reliability markers in Bulgarian parliamentary speech. Now, I put on the cover of my presentation a well-known Bulgarian politician whose nickname is Dancho Mentata, Dancho the Liar. So, is Dancho a liar? He is very often accused of lying. So politicians accuse the opponents of lying. It's quite often, but in Bulgarian, there's a more elegant way of doing this. And okay, this is by using evidential forms. So evidentiality is a grammatical category in Bulgarian, coding the source of information and its classification according to the speaker's cognitive states. The category is based on the opposition direct versus indirect information, in which the indicative mood is marked for direct evidence, as opposed to a paradigm of three indirect evidentials, the reportative, the inferential, and the dubitative. Now, a little explanation is needed here. Bulgarian is considered a language whose evidentiality has a weak morphological marking. So there is not such a big difference sometimes between different evidentials. Like, for example, reportative and inferential differ only in the third person by the omission or the presence of an auxiliary. This is the auxiliary B. Sometimes the dubitative, on the other hand, is marked by an additional auxiliary, the auxiliary bill, which can be omitted. And then it coincides with the reportative. So the reportative can express dubitativity too. So yeah, it's complicated. Okay, from the semantic point of view, the dubitative is the evidential that codes non-reliability. So towards non-first-hand information. So somebody said something, but I don't believe this is the case. However, in certain contexts, all indirect evidentials can express non-reliability. One such context is media text. And the political speech, I believe, is another context of this type. My objectives are to explore three evidential auxiliaries. The auxiliary bill, which is like B evidential marker, auxiliary that comes from the B auxiliary. Then the future positive auxiliary, щял, and the future negative auxiliary, нямало. Okay. The problem is that they are found both in the paradigm of the reliability neutral evidentials, so they don't express non-reliability, and in the paradigm of the dubitative that expresses non-reliability. My idea is that the political speech, the political discourse, and the parliamentary speech specifically will support the non-reliability interpretation. And to test this assumption, I used the Parliament BG corpus of Bulgarian parliamentary debates. I extracted the evidentials with containing those auxiliaries, I classified them and I analyzed them in context. Okay, and the results, this is Cornelia, she's innocent, she never lies. Okay, now to obtain the quantitative data for the use of the evidential auxiliaries, I used several regular expressions to search for the following strings. Now, string 1 and 2 contain the first evidential auxiliary. This is bill. String 1 contains also the auxiliary B indicative. And string 2 is without the auxiliary B indicative. So in this case, the auxiliary B indicative is omitted. Okay, 3 and 4 are about the future evidential auxiliary, again with and without the auxiliary be indicative. Then the future negative auxiliary NYAML or NYAML law, again with and without be indicative. And finally, two very nice structures where the future auxiliary and auxiliary bill are combined. They co-occur in the same grammatical form, and like string 7 and 8 should be interpreted as dubitatives. They are not ambiguous. Unfortunately, they are very rare. So I put the results in tables, as it's kind of difficult to understand the numbers here. I marked, like in purple, the first person, singular and plural, to show you that in the case where the structures can be interpreted both as non-dubitatives and dubitatives, which is the case with the first and the second person. Let me remind you that in these persons, the reportative and the inferential and the dubitative sometimes coincide completely. So the interpretation is only dubitative. So 0 cases of non-dubitative interpretation. On the other hand, the third person in this structure should be interpreted as inferential. And still, there are the marking in yellow, there are some dubitative interpretations. So yeah, my point is that probably the context of parliamentary speech supports this interpretation, which is unusual. Okay, and this is the table with the auxiliary bill, but without the auxiliary be indicative. Very complicated, I know. So just to show this, the output is only in the third person, because the omission of the indicative auxiliary is only possible in the third person to form thus the reportative and the dubitative. So first I wanted to point out here that there are much more results for this type of structure as compared with the previous type with the auxiliary be indicative. And almost all are dubitatives. Okay, same thing for the future, for the positive future evidential. I will not go into details. And without the auxiliary be indicative. Then the negative future without with the auxiliary be indicative is quite rare. Only 3 occurrences. 2 of them were dubitatives. Of course, there were more negative futures with omitted auxiliary be indicative. And finally, as I said, the beautiful dubitative structures almost do not occur. There was 1 positive and 0 negative dubitative structures, unfortunately. Okay, so yes, I think this hypothesis that political speech would support the dubitative interpretation of evidential auxiliaries is justified, but as expected, depending on the co-occurrence with the auxiliary be indicative and its omission. Now, the constructions with the auxiliary be indicative are grammatically ambiguous in the first and the second person, as already mentioned, and they tend to be interpreted as dubitatives. While in the third person, they should be interpreted as inferentials, like reliability neutral evidentials, because the inferential cannot usually express dubitativity. They usually have temporal value, as I have shown in sentence 8. Когато ГЕРБ е дошла на власт, е бил влязъл в сила. Така ли е? Така е. When ГЕРБ, this political party, came into power, it had supposedly been put into effect. Is that correct? That's correct. So this is the inferential pluperfect here, like a preceding action as compared to came into power. Still, there were enough occurrences with dubitative interpretation, which, as I said, is unusual for inferentials. Yeah, I think this context really supports this kind of interpretation. So, on the opposite, constructions with omitted auxiliary be indicative are most often interpreted as dubitatives, with a few exceptions, really. As you saw in the tables, there were only 3 in the first table and 8 in the second one. Now, they can be tenses of the reportative, like they just report some information, they quote somebody else's words. Or, which is more unusual, sometimes they have inferential reading. I think it was only 1 or 2 such cases. So how do we disambiguate? How do we know a certain evidential form is dubitative? Of course, the context helps us disambiguate. And as we can see from the examples I extracted, there are specific contexts in which the dubitative occurs. In a very nice study on the dubitative in Bulgarian, Krasimira Aleksova states that as a grammatical form, the dubitative is the core of the dubitativity subfield of the functional and semantic field of reliability, whose periphery comprises different lexical modifiers. And she defines 4 types of lexical modifiers. Well, my study confirms this what Alexova states, and adds some more contexts that are not described by her. So the particle ush allegedly is generally accepted as one of the most frequent lexical markers of dubitativity, and it co-occurs with the grammatical form of the dubitative quite often. However, there are other particles and adverbials that appear to be more frequent, like edvaline, for instance, scarcely, hardly, which was more frequent than the other particle. Now, expressions of contradiction are very often found in this context, like you see, you know, oh, please, come on, and so on. Excuse me. Of course, words denoting false statement like a lie, to lie, manipulation, and softer synonyms like tales or myth, for example. Like in 23, четвърти мит, санирането щяло да подкрепи местния бизнес. 1/4 myth, remediation will support local businesses. So this is the dubitative form here, supported by the lexical unit myth. And there are some other devices besides lexical ones that can suggest or to intensify the non-reliability of a given information, and those are some syntactic structures and some textual structures. Okay, yeah, negation is very often used like a device, like a disclaimer of the previous statement. As it is shown in 24, да, ама те ни били останали 0. Не, останали са и изброяваме. Yes, but they had 0 left. No, there are some left. So yeah, the speaker just make a disclaimer of the previous statement. Adversative conjunctions are very often found in the context of the dubitative. Questions as a rhetoric device, like a false dispute between participants. Repetitive constructions with WH words. Vocatives also. And there were enough cases in which there were no other means to suggest non-reliability. It was just the dubitative form, so it is usually enough to suggest non-reliability. And to conclude, the auxiliaries I analyzed are used to form complex evidentials, which in political discourse are most often interpreted as dubitatives, and especially if the B indicative auxiliary is omitted, then the dubitative interpretation is 98%. Those auxiliaries may be seen as a grammatical means to express non-reliability, as compared with some lexical means that suggest non-reliability too. They're not less frequent in parliamentary speech. Like all the evidential auxiliaries extracted for this study were 955, while all the forms of the noun lie, 1,300. A manipulation, 600. And the verb form is lăgă, he or she lied, 88, just 88 occurrences. So the study may have some applications for recognition, disambiguation, and annotation of evidential forms in corpora, and for sentiment analysis. Some references, and thank you for your attention.